It's going to take time to calculate the costs of the damage left behind by Hurricane Milton and then Helene before that. And while FEMA says it has enough money for immediate response and recovery needs, there's still more than a month of hurricane season left. And there are other storms that are already brewing. Right now, the National Hurricane Center is tracking 4 more storm systems in the Atlantic. Meanwhile, in Washington, more than 60 House Democrats have signed on to a letter urging Speaker Mike Johnson to, quote, immediately call Congress back into session to pass more disaster funding. But Johnson so far is not budging. Joining us now, Florida Congressman Jared Moskowitz. He previously served as director of the Florida Division of Emergency Management. Thank you very much for joining us. First off, how is your district dealing with this right now? How are they doing?
Sure, thanks for having me. My district is okay. I'm in South Florida, although I do think what Milton will go down in history being known for is the tornadoes. We had 126 tornado warnings here in Florida. That's a record. 45 tornadoes. Touchdown, that's also a record. You know, the 126 tornado warnings is only beat by the Alabama tornado outbreak of 2011. So these tornadoes hit in areas that, you know, weren't getting tropical storm force winds, weren't anywhere near where the hurricane was here on the East Coast, but we're getting some outer bands. And that is something that we have talked about here in the state about. You got to pay attention to these tornadoes, and this storm proved it. We're okay, but where I'm at, but some areas in St. Lucie County and in Palm Beach County got hit pretty hard.
It was a volatile storm system. Congress is on recess until November 12th. We here at NBC News asked Speaker Mike Johnson about his decision to not call Congress back to pass immediate relief funding. Here's what he told us.
Mr. Speaker, was it a mistake to leave and adjourn the Congress for the campaign trail without addressing more disaster relief funding, given the circumstances that we now find ourselves in?
Well, the fact is, I think many people have not fully understood, is that we did address it, and we did appropriate $20 billion additional dollars to FEMA with early drawdown authority. So they're sitting on a giant pile of cash, and they haven't used it yet. As of Monday of this week, the Biden administration had only sent out about 1% of those dollars. They'd only distributed 1%. So there's plenty of money to address the immediate needs, and that's what we're counting on them and calling upon them to do.
Is that right? That there's a ton of money that FEMA has that it's sitting on and not using?
Well, he's kind of right. Okay, so first of all, he didn't appropriate any additional dollars. He used the word additional. What he did is instead of giving FEMA the money they needed to complete the 2024 year budget, because the disaster relief fund ran out of money, they originally were going to give FEMA $10 billion as part of the CR, but then the speaker stripped that out. Instead, what they said is you can start drawing money down from your 2025 budget early, which did give FEMA money. So he's right there, gave them $20 billion. So he's kicking the problem down the line. Now, what he didn't say is out of that $20 billion, $8 billion is already committed because FEMA has $8 billion of expenses from previous storms to reimburse that was on hold. So they have $12 billion, $12 billion to finish the 2024 season and for all of the 2025 season. By the way, we're not out of hurricane season, but they're going to spend a lot of that money in the Hurricane Helene response and in the Hurricane Milton response. And again, we're not out of hurricane season. He's also not right because he doesn't address the SBA. Small Business Administration, which gives out community disaster loans, is out of money. They don't have enough money to do both Milton and Helene. And that's the money that gets these small business, family-owned businesses through their community disaster because their communities right now are closed. And so I'm worried about the SBA not having enough money. He knew that problem before we went on break. Listen, I know why the speaker doesn't want to call us back. He doesn't want to call us back because he can't pass that bill without the Democrats. His caucus is such a mess. He doesn't have the vote. So I don't blame him, right? If I had that caucus, I wouldn't call them back either.
So you're saying this is all politics and what's being left behind are people?
Oh, I'm shocked. I'm shocked 3.5 weeks before the election. It's all politics. Who would have thought?
Jared Moskowitz, very dry. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Both candidates are on the campaign trail today in battleground states. Donald Trump was in Michigan, while Vice President Kamala Harris is making stops in Nevada and Arizona. Also on the trail tonight, another big name, former President Barack Obama. He's headlining a rally in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that's set to begin any moment now. We will bring you those remarks live when they start. It's somewhat of a full circle moment, as Harris was one of Obama's earliest supporters, knocking on doors for his presidential campaign in Iowa way back in 2007. Now the former president gets to return the favor. This will be the first of a series of appearances for Obama in the final stretch of Harris's campaign, one that has already drawn a lot of comparisons to his 2008 bid. But there's one factor of this race that would have been mind-boggling to anyone in the year 2008. In the span of 24 hours, you have an Obama and a Cheney campaigning in the same state for the same candidate. It's just another indication of how broad the Harris coalition has become. Last night, former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney held an event with 3 former members of the Trump administration, where they all warned the country against ever letting their former boss back into the White House.
When you come to a place as a country where you have one party that is dedicated to erasing the truth about the most serious attack on our capital since the War of 1812, that party has lost its way, and those are not people that we can trust to lead us. So, look, I think it's not only Donald Trump who has to be defeated on November 5th, but also those who have enabled him.
Joining me now is an all-star panel. Claire McCaskill, former Democratic senator from Missouri and MSNBC political analyst. Cornell Belcher, pollster and MSNBC political analyst. Sarah Matthews, former deputy press secretary in the Trump White House. She was part of that Cheney event last night. And Juanita Tolliver, MSNBC political analyst, host of the What a Day podcast, and author of the upcoming book, A More Perfect Party. Couldn't be more excited with this coalition that I have here. I'm going to start with the people at the table. Sarah, just tell me what the event was like. Tell me how this was put together, because that is pretty amazing to me. It's one thing to publicly release a statement and say, hey, I don't think this guy is good. It's something else to organize and publicly get together and say, I need you to vote for the other candidate.
Yeah, this was the first time that the 4 of us have all been on stage together, and we're all outspoken Trump critics and still identify as Republicans, though, and have said that we're not going to be voting for him and encouraged others to vote for Kamala Harris because we believe that Donald Trump is such a threat to democracy. And we all know that the stakes are too high in this election. Right. So we don't want to sit on the sidelines. We wanted to get our message out there in battleground Pennsylvania and Montgomery County. And we had a great turnout. It was around 1,300 people showed up, and they were energized. And even driving into the suburbs of Philly, I saw so many Harris wall signs, and it gave me such hope. And so that was the message that we were there to spread. We wanted to lay out what a second Trump term would look like and encourage people to show up on Election Day.
Claire, I want to ask you this. From a pure campaign running for office standpoint, how powerful is it for the Harris campaign to have not just Republicans, but former Trump employee Republicans speaking on her behalf? What kinds of people does that appeal to, not just in the suburbs, but even throughout the state when people hear this story?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about a permission structure, and we're seeing some evidence of that. You know, I'm very suspect of all the polling at this point, but I have noticed a trend where we're now up to about 9% of the Republicans who say they're voting for Kamala Harris, and that is more than we saw, say, 2 months ago. So there's that. And there's also this issue that I think is really important, Jason, and that is this is a binary choice. I want to say this very clearly for all of our friends that don't think Kamala Harris is perfect, that don't think she is strong enough in terms of her language or her actions in protecting innocent Palestinians, or she's not doing enough on an issue like climate that they think she should be doing. Anyone who does not vote for Kamala Harris is supporting Donald Trump. And it's just that simple. And I think what you'll see tonight with Barack Obama is he'll do the masterful job he always does, reminding everyone that this isn't about judging her against a perfect standard based on the issue you care most about. This is about whether or not you want to stay home and help elect Donald Trump. And that's what all these Republicans coming out, that's what all of the Trump former staffers and cabinet members and national security people are saying to America. Hey, you're not a Democrat. if you vote for Kamala Harris, you are a patriotic American.
Cornel, I want to take this to you. The new popular word is permission structure. I hear a lot of people saying it. As a political scientist, I'm sitting here kind of digging through it. What is this permission structure? Because my immediate brain is nobody has to give me permission if I want to vote for somebody. I'm going to vote for them. I know what a validator is. I know if this is a person who seems like me who says you should vote for this candidate. But explain to the audience what this sort of permission structure idea is and how you see it playing out in polling.
Well, thanks for giving me the easy question.
I know.
Well, you know, brother, we are actually in a grand experiment because, like what Senator McCaskill just touched on is, you know, are we going to see more Republicans cross over and vote D this time than we've seen? Look, I've always been skeptical about this permission structure, this ideal that you're going to get a nice segment of Republicans crossing over. We certainly haven't seen that in recent elections. But what the permission structure does is it's a self-other expectation, right? It is if he thinks it's okay or if they're doing it, well, then it's okay for me to do it as well. And I got to tell you, if you look back at sort of, you know, mainstream traditional conservatives and Republicans, it doesn't get any bigger permission structure than the Cheneys, right? The Cheneys are Republicans, right? And so if Vice President Cheney is okay, well then maybe it's okay. I think that's the permission structure. But it's a grand experiment that we're seeing here. And if it works, look, if it works, it will be the most diverse. The biggest, broadest, most diverse coalition that we've seen in this country in a very, very long time. And as Claire McCaskill said, I think there's some evidence of it, but we got to see it in battleground states. When I look at the suburbs and when I look at some of these more rural areas, you know, will she do 2-3 points better in some of those more rural areas of Pennsylvania and Wisconsin than Biden and Obama did? I think if we see that permission structure working.
So, Juanita, when I hear about this permission structure, and I hear about this in battleground states, right, my mind goes to, you know, Darth Vader saying, look, I've had my issues with the Emperor, right, but you got to vote for Leia this time. Because, yeah, it's the first thing that occurs to me. How does this messaging hit Democrats, though? Because I know some liberal Democrats that they find this frustrating. They're like, wait a minute, I don't want to share my big tent with these other people. How do you tailor the message so that you are appealing to Republicans who are like, hey, I don't want to risk democracy, but also not offending Democrats who are like, these are the people who've been throwing tomatoes at us for 8 years?
Well, you just said it with the first part of that statement, because this is about survival. Mm-hmm. Survival for us as a democratic society, survival for the sanctity of our Constitution. Put it in those broader terms. And that's something that is going to have mass appeal across partisan lines. Democrats can get behind that because they know, hey, we're not fooling with y'all once we get back to anything that represents a normal substantive dialogue about the issues.
Right.
But right now, for our collective well-being and survival, and for the sake of beating Donald Trump, we can deal with it. Now, I do think that there is something that the Harris campaign is going to have to continue to balance. And we saw that play out last week. Remember when her campaign was in Michigan? They had conversations with Arab Americans and Muslim Americans in Michigan, a critical state where the uncommitted campaign garnered 101,000 primary votes for the uncommitted movement. Mm-hmm. Biden only won Michigan by 150,000 votes in 2020. Right. So that is the balance work of, yes, make your broader appeal for survival, but keep the home base happy too.
Sarah, what kind of private conversations do you hear? I mean, don't put names on them, right? But when you're talking to, you know, your fellow Republicans, you know, are they saying to you secretly, privately in text messages, chat groups, oh my God, thank you, because I feel the same way? Or are you having people say, look, we can ride out another Trump administration. Why are you bringing the alarm bells? What kind of things do you hear amongst your Republican friends?
It's a mix.
Okay.
So I get people who are texting me privately saying, thank you for what you're doing. Really appreciate your voice being out there. And these are people who work for Republicans, work in politics and follow all of this, but that aren't going to speak out.
Right.
And that's okay, but I know that they know that their vote is private. So these are Republicans who may go to the ballot box and cast a vote and cross that party line. And I hope that we're giving them that permission structure to do so and creating it. But then on the flip side, I do get a lot of pushback of people who are saying, how could you vote for a Democrat? And you're saying you're willing to set policy aside in this election. Policy doesn't matter to you. Of course it matters. But like you were saying, there will come a day where we can debate policy again. And I look forward to that day. But we need to defeat Donald Trump first, because to me, Constitution and character also matter when voting for president. And Donald Trump has shown us that he will not uphold his oath of office and he will not defend the Constitution. So I don't want to put someone like that back in power. So if we had run any other Republican, they probably would have had my vote. I say that, there are some exceptions in there.
Right, we got a list here that we got to filter through.
There's a couple weird guys out there,
There's a couple weirdos that might not get my vote, but for the most part, I probably would have, because I don't think they necessarily would have risked democracy. But that's why myself and Liz Cheney and others, we know that there are some things that are bigger than party line and that we're willing to prioritize the country over our party. And so we are willing to cross the line, and hopefully other Republicans will follow suit. And I do want to add quickly, too, that in Pennsylvania, in the primary process, there were 158,000 Republicans who voted for Nikki Haley. That is a closed primary. No Democrats or independents can vote in it.
Right.
And those people knew that Donald Trump was still going to be the nominee, yet they showed up in protest to vote. So if we can convince some of those folks to not sit this election out or leave the top of their ballot blank and to cross over and vote for VP Harris, then that's a win.
If you're a young man, it's very important in election season, who's looking to impress ladies, to be the alpha, to be attractive, the best thing you can do is to wear your Trump support on your sleeve. Show that you are a real man. Show that you are not a beta, right?
This week on Fox, Trump advisor Stephen Miller made his pitch to young male voters. Vote for Trump or else you are a beta, which is maybe the most beta way ever of pronouncing the word beta. A beta. The fixation on being an alpha extends well beyond Stephen Miller. It is the Trump campaign's entire ballgame as it tries to win over the so-called bro vote. With 26 days to go before Election Day, Trump's strategy here is to turn out young men by engaging with the content creators they apparently pay attention to. That means interviewing with podcasters like the Nelk Boys, seen here smashing a television screen featuring Kamala Harris at the debate. But it isn't just all outrage content. The Nelk Boys are also going to work on behalf of Donald Trump by mounting a multi-million-dollar voter registration push at music festivals, on dating apps, and on popular bro-friendly podcasts. And tonight, we learned that the Harris campaign is also trying to explore the far reaches of the Manoverse. Tomorrow, Governor Tim Walz will assume the role of coach once again and deliver a pregame pep talk to the Mankato West high school football team. That's his former squad. The next day, Walz will go pheasant hunting with a group of influencers, including a veterans advocate and a black rodeo star. This is the world we live in now. Joining me now is Michelle Goldberg, opinion columnist for The New York Times. Michelle, so I understand that Kamala Harris, by virtue of being Kamala Harris, is in a more compromised position to assuage male egos and say they don't have to worry about, being replaced by women by virtue of the fact that she's trying to be the first female president, right? What do you make of this kind of Walz v. Trump and Vance battle for masculinity?
Well, I mean, part of it's been clear for a while that there's this enormous gender gap that Trump speaks to a demographic of men who feel resentful, they feel left behind. Young men are doing worse than young women by a lot of different metrics in terms of education and jobs and things like that, or at least elite in certain elite fields. And so I think that what's happening is that women, not all women, but women broadly detest Donald Trump. And so he has to make up for those votes somewhere, right? He doesn't want to moderate. I don't think he knows how to. And so what the Trump campaign has been trying to do is to sort of remake the electorate, right? They have these plans to go after irregular, infrequent voters, to kind of disdain traditional canvassing operation and instead in favor of what they call vote chasing. And this is all an effort to do that. And so it's smart for the Harris campaign, if they can, to cut into those margins somewhat. What I think is telling is that you don't see the reverse. You don't see any efforts among Trump or Vance to try to reach out to traditionally female audiences.
Women.
Yeah, exactly.
And in fact, their strategy to reach out to the bros is so hyper masculine and so dismissive of equality, that they may be actually actively alienating women in the process of this outreach. I was struck by President Obama's remarks around strength and masculinity. He made them just a few minutes ago at his event in Pennsylvania. For people who missed it, let's just take a listen.
I've noticed this especially with some men who seem to think Trump's behavior, the bullying and the putting people down, is a sign of strength. And I am here to tell you that is not what real strength is. It never has been. Real strength is about working hard and carrying a heavy load without complaining. Real strength is about taking responsibility for your actions and telling the truth even when it's inconvenient. Real strength is about helping people who need it and standing up for those who can't always stand up for themselves.
It's like the most obvious sort of moral advice, and yet it's so overdue and so infrequent that we hear someone say, like, this isn't actually what being a man is about. And I thought it was so important for him to make those remarks. And I actually thought, like, instead of sort of playing footsie with the idea, this kind of like comical version of 21st century masculinity, maybe we need more of that. And that could as easily have been said by Kamala Harris as Tim Walz as any other person that's a surrogate for the campaign.
No, and I think taking it on directly, because Donald Trump has been such a malign influence on masculinity in this country. And although I wouldn't attribute all the estrangement between young men and young women that is, kind of causing so much social enmity, I think at least part of it stems from the Trump presidency, from the example he set, from the intense backlash that he created, right? It's like you don't have someone like that at the top without creating corrosion throughout the society.
There is we should also be careful about saying that this is a strategy that doesn't appeal to some subsection of women, right? Because Trump has won white women, and he is still doing well with white women in the year 2024 as he pursues the strategy. This is what Trump said today in Detroit about his appeal towards women.
They said that women don't like me. I think women love me because they want to be safe. And with me, they're safe. With other people, they're not safe. It's true.
Okay. What do you think of that?
Well, look, I think that there's always been women have always been leading figures in the religious right. They've always been leading figures in the anti-feminist movement. I mean, the anti-feminist movement provided lots of career opportunities and opportunities for a public career to women like Phyllis Schlafly and her descendants. And so I think, look, there's always been women who found security in traditional gender roles and who are willing to take the trade of, kind of safety and veneration in exchange for freedom and autonomy. But we see again and again that that's not a deal that most women want to take. And I think especially in the crude and smarmy and vaguely threatening way that Trump offers it, I cannot imagine that it's going to win over anyone who is on the fence.
Right. It's one thing if Trump is talking about safety in communities, no matter where that, how inaccurate his data may be. It's another when his surrogates are out there with a sledgehammer, taking that sledgehammer to the screen of a woman who has earned her place at the top of the Democratic ticket, right? Even as a woman who may not like the Democratic value, the values on the Democratic ticket, seeing someone deface the image of a woman like that.
Right, or seeing the Trump voter who bought the Taylor Swift guitar just so that he could smash it up. I mean, it's this infantile, petulant kind of masculinity.
And that infantile, petulant masculinity is what Donald Trump is betting on to win him this election at the polls. It is a risky bet, and what it does to a society in the meantime is anyone's guess. Michelle Goldberg, it's great to see you. Thank you for your time tonight.
Meanwhile, Republican Congressman Chuck Edwards of North Carolina is pushing back on the disinformation and conspiracy theories Donald Trump and his allies continue to spread in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene and now around Hurricane Milton. In an email to his constituents yesterday, Congressman Edwards, who represents western North Carolina ravaged by the flooding after Helene, wrote this, quote, "These conspiracy theories, while certainly frustrating, have done more harm than most people may realize. The spreading of falsehoods has diverted state, local, and federal resources from helping NC-11, his district, recover toward refuting hearsay and repeatedly trying to set the record straight." Congressman Edwards went on to write that it is disappointing to have to spend an email dispelling the outlandish rumors being spread online about Hurricane Helene response and recovery. Meanwhile, a North Carolina man is blaming former President Trump for his father-in-law's refusal to get help from FEMA. A man identifying himself as Anthony called into the Dan Abrams show on Sirius XM saying his father-in-law in Asheville only believes the former president, and it is actually breaking up our family.
My father-in-law lives just outside of Asheville, North Carolina, and he was badly damaged by Hurricane Helene. And he has refused all FEMA help because he's a hardcore Trumper. And he literally believes that if he accepts anything from FEMA, they're going to take his house. I don't understand how so many people are under the spell of this freaking con man. I don't understand it.
Well, it's absolutely heartbreaking about your father-in-law. I'm so sorry to hear it. I hope. Man, it's hard to even imagine it. I mean, he lost almost everything, and he's refusing all help from the federal government and complaining to us that he doesn't have food, that he doesn't have the stuff he needs, and yet he won't accept the help. What the hell are we supposed to do? We're not in a position to be able to fly across the country and help him. Yeah. There's people begging us to get him to accept help, and he won't do it. Wow.
And I guarantee you, I'm not the only one. I guarantee you, I'm not the only one.
I wish there was something I could say as to, I don't know. Does he have access to any electronics where you could send him some information debunking this, and that he might?
We've done all of that. We've done all of that. We've sent him all the FEMA bulletins. We've sent him all the stuff from the fact checkers. He doesn't believe it. He thinks it's all, he just believes Trump. Literally, Dan, it's a cult. He's a cult member. I'm sorry to say it. He's a cult member. And he's my father-in-law, and it sucks.
Just one story there after the storm. Joining us now, longtime political strategist, our good friend Mike Murphy. Mike, it's great to have you here. You've been in the Republican political game for a long time.
We now say racket, but yes,
the racket.
Yes,
okay,
really,
I'll let you say it.
It went from a game to a racket, which is why I'm so infuriated. But go ahead.
So let's talk about the racket then. It used to be that the kind of stuff we're hearing from Marjorie Taylor Greene and Donald Trump was the guy at the end of the bar. He had a conspiracy theory he wanted to tell you about, and you can kind of laugh him off, and there were dark corners of the internet where it lived. But now it's been elevated to the center of the political discourse. The guy who was president and wants to be again is elevating all this stuff.
Right. In the old days, we'd have the little kook wing that would bark at the moon, everybody, Now, they've been encouraged, they've been put on steroids to get front and center. And again, the old method was people knew this is serious business, let alone a hurricane. So, oh no, we don't do that. Now we've got a ringmaster saying, you step right up. Let's hear more about space lasers. That is the fundamental shift, tragically, in our politics now. There's no policing, no shame, no curation. It's just bring the freak show up and put it, and people believe it. And with the internet, you can send anything around for free. You don't need to be responsible enough to get a job and buy some stamps to write a nutty letter. Now you hit send. So here we are. We have reality show politics. Stakes couldn't be higher, and the content of it couldn't be more depressing.
I mean, we had the President of the United States from the White House yesterday having to look down the barrel of the camera and say the government cannot engineer hurricanes, let alone target them to red states or counties that support Donald Trump. I guess the good news, Mike, is that the governors and that congressman we heard from there, because of the stakes and how serious this storm is and the people who are suffering, have stepped into that void.
Yeah, there are a few grown-ups left trying to say, not enough. They're outnumbered. Yeah. But hopefully truth will rise above. The very fact we're in this battle now is absolutely crazy. I mean, look, elections are full of, one of my favorite quotes is Bismarck used to say, the greatest lies in life are told before the marriage, after the hunt, and during the election. But this is a hurricane. This is life and death.
Yeah.
And these games are being played. So, yeah, it's disgusting, and hopefully people will reject it.
And Mike, certainly some Republican governors, including Governor DeSantis, trying to take the politics out of the storm, in response and saying, look, the federal government is giving us what we need. But it is going to be a backdrop of the campaign. We're under 4 weeks now until Election Day. Let's get just your snapshot as to where you things stand. The polls are relatively even. There's some, I would say, in political circles, some sense that maybe Trump has a little momentum, but then it's rebutted by another poll that says actually Harris has this and she has $1 billion to spend.
Yeah, everybody's a poll junkie because we all want to relax and have some idea what's going to happen in the future. Might as well go to Madame Zorba. Polls tell you what happened a week ago, but you look at the trend lines. Nationally, she's moving in the right direction. She's closing the gap on being perceived as being able to run the economy. That was Joe Biden's real problem. He was double digits down on that. Now she's closed it to single. That's very good for her. She's being perceived as new, change, which is quite a hat trick since she's an incumbent. But Trump's tone is what a lot of people want to get away from. So I think she's on track to win the national vote. The question is the states. Last week, there were some bad internal polls popping around in Michigan. Got a hot Senate race there. That's tightening. All the Republican senators are creeping up a little in the competitive races. So last week was a scary week. That polling data, taken last week, we'll see if her media offensive and kind of flooding the zone, shifting from the Ming Vaz candidacy they were running, where lock waltz up, don't say anything. Now, hopefully, that charm offensive will start to move the numbers back. But I would just sum up by saying Michigan, a state I've worked quite a bit, is the new Pennsylvania. There's trouble there. Trump is demagoguing the EV issue, and he's lying, by the way.
Can you explain that, Mike, just for people who aren't up to speed on what the EV issue is?
Yeah, so electric vehicles. A lot of Republicans think it's some kind of left-wing mandate. Now, I drive one, and I'm a right-wing nut because I don't like paying California gas prices. I love the damn thing. I like to drag race gas cars and beat them, and I'm a motorhead. I'm a wrenching gas guy. My lifetime average is 3 miles to the gallon. But anyway, the point is there are 20,000 new EV manufacturing jobs, auto jobs in Michigan, and it's on its way to doubling. It's the future of the auto industry worldwide. We either play or there's going to be no American auto industry. People don't even, we just took a poll on this. I do some work in the area. People have no idea that China makes twice as many cars as we do. They think we're still number one. They're eating markets all over the world. But Trump rolls in and says, and some of the leadership of the UAW makes this worse, says these EVs are going to wipe out your jobs. Vote for her. She's going to make you get rid of gas cars, not true, and wipe out your jobs. And it's working. I've encouraged the Harris campaign, which I'm publicly for. I'm one of those Romney, Bush, McCain Republicans for Harris. Character building experience for a right winger like me, but we got to stop Trump. To go tell the story, because nobody knows it in Michigan. They got a great story. This is the biggest boom in Georgia and Michigan in manufacturing we've had in years, yet it's a secret. I would suggest if they want to win Michigan, full offense, none of this defense stuff. Don't let Trump demagogue.
It's jobs.
There's
at
other
the end
stuff.
Of the day. It's jobs.
It's manufacturing jobs, which are the key to metal bending states. So, we'll see. There's some time, but with early voting, we got about 12 days here, and then significant votes going to start rolling in. So this is a really key window. I will say, in the national poll, all the attributes are going her way, slow but sure. That is a very good sign, but we sure need it in the metal benders. We need it in Pennsylvania and Michigan.
So, Mike, let's stick with Michigan in terms of the EVs. It's not just the auto workers. It's supplementary working industries. People who work with their hands would benefit from an explosion of EV construction.
First, there's a big capital expenditure, all the charging gear. It's the best thing to happen to electricians in the history since the light bulb. If I wasn't a political BSer for a living, I'd be in an electrician school and get my card because I'm going to be working. There's a massive shortage of electricians in America. So there's all that infrastructure going in. There's the supply chain for it. Let's put it this way. The president of one of the American auto companies told me it's real simple. The future is going to be more EV than gas. Won't be totally gas, but it won't be totally EV. And worldwide, Mexico, all these places, if we don't compete there, we're toast. My famous auto company may not be here in 15 years. And I employ hundreds of thousands of people, and I pay a hell of a lot more than the Chinese do. $9 an hour auto workers over there. So this thing, we're in a race here for survival. And when half the market is told by our leaders that they're Biden communist mobiles, you shouldn't even consider one, that's the best thing Chairman Xi's got going for him. Because the Chinese are on their way to wipe out not only us, the Europeans, the Koreans, and the Japanese. So we can compete, but we got to get behind this stuff and not demagogue it. And you're going to be able to buy whatever car you want. If you try an EV, you're going to want one because they're faster and you don't have to pay for gas.
Another day, another tax cut proposal from Donald Trump. At the Detroit Economic Club, he pledged to make interest on car loans fully tax deductible. Now, he already announced this week that he supports ending double taxation for Americans living abroad. Our experts are here to talk about it. Ron Insana, CNBC senior analyst and the CEO of iFi AI. All right, Ron.
Yes, ma'am.
So far, we have got no tax on tips.
Correct.
Social Security benefits, overtime pay, now car loans, and getting rid of double taxation, basically for rich people who live overseas. And all of this is on top of his 2017 cuts.
Which would have to be extended at the end of next year.
Correctamundo. For those who say, oh, he's just a performer, don't take it seriously, it's clownish at best. And for people who do take him seriously, have we heard one serious word about how any of this will be paid for? And
No.
don't you dare say tariffs.
Well, no, obviously not. And the tariffs would have to be so substantially beyond what even he is proposing to provide any income to the federal government that would offset these expenditures, that they would be unworkable. They'd launch it. It would trigger a trade war, so on and so forth. Even the ones he has on the table as proposals would probably trigger a trade war right now. But no, there is no financing mechanism for any of this thus far. And it's just adding more and more to what's already assumed to be $7.5 trillion in additional debt from the proposals he laid on the table prior to what you just outlined. And some have even suggested it could be as high as $15 trillion in additional debt. So, no.
So what do the old school Republicans that were always all about debt and deficit, and their big complaint is we can't live with the spending of Democrats. We can't live with the spending of Joe Biden, who complained about the pieces about the proposals that we saw in the last 4 years. What do they tell you when we hear the numbers of what Trump will do to the deficit, which is significantly higher than Harris's plans?
Not a word. Not a word. Not a single word.
Well,
and in fact, to be fair, no one is talking about debt and deficits in a meaningful way.
Correct.
I mean, to the vice president's credit, she does have some pay-fors included in her proposals to reduce taxes for people under $400,000, to extend certain aspects of the Trump tax cut, provide child tax credits, and so on and so forth. There are some, as we used to call them, pay-fors in there. But even she would increase the national debt by $1.5 trillion to $3.5 trillion.
$3.5. For people who are wondering what her closing economic message should be, we heard something tonight that might be a good idea. Watch this.
Reason some people think, wow, I don't know, I remember that economy when he first came in being pretty good. Yeah, it was pretty good because it was my economy. We had 75 straight months of job growth that I handed over to him. It wasn't something he did. I had spent 8 years cleaning up the mess that the Republicans had left me the last time. So just in case everybody has a hazy memory, he didn't do nothing except those big tax cuts.
Should they just put this on loop for the next 30 days?
100%. I mean, it's interesting. I'm going to use an old person's word. That was a stem winder of a speech that the former president gave. We have not seen something like that in quite a long time from any political candidate, quite honestly. And in addition to that, the piece that I would add is if you look at the first 3 years of the Trump administration in terms of job growth and GDP growth, they were virtually identical to the last 3 years of the Obama presidency, almost to the number. 2% plus growth, 200,000 jobs per month, virtually identical. So for when Donald Trump says that his economy was infinitely stronger or as strong as anything we've ever seen or never seen before in history, however he chooses to characterize it, it just empirically is not true. It's almost identical to the last 3 years of the Obama administration's economic track record.
I want to bring Justin Wolfers into this conversation, professor of economics and public policy at the University of Michigan. Justin, when people are going on and on saying, I can't vote for Kamala Harris because of inflation, Yes, she's gone through her policies, her 89-page proposal. You can see it on our website. But would a more effective message for the next 30 days for her be? You don't like inflation under the Biden-Harris administration? Check out what Donald Trump will do. Because this idea that inflation is so bad under her, his plans will make inflation significantly worse.
Absolutely. I think there's a couple of things worth calling out. The first, of course, is if what you want to do is reduce inflation, then putting a 10% tax on every imported good that you buy, including, by the way, the imports that are used as intermediate goods for manufacturers to then produce things like cars. Well, by jingo, that's going to be inflationary. We think that'll add about $3,000 to the annual cost of living for a typical American family. And then the thing that no one's really talking about is, remember, Donald Trump has said that he should get a say in what the Federal Reserve does. Now, we actually have an example of a strongman populist who has decided to take over monetary policy recently. That was Erdogan in Turkey. And you can call your friends in Turkey and ask them if they like 60 or 70% inflation. And chances are they'll tell you that having an independent central bank is something to be treasured and something that we should really look after over here.
Well, guess what? People might not be talking about it, but it was going to be my next question because we heard about it today. Yep. Barron's was reporting that one of Trump's advisors, a hedge fund manager, suggested having a shadow Fed chair.
You know, it's funny. Scott Bessent, who
That's who did it, yes.
Worked with George Soros for years and is now a Donald Trump supporter, rather ironically, given how often Republicans blame George Soros for everything that's wrong in the world. This is one of the worst ideas I have ever heard in the 40 years that I've been doing this. We used to have something called the Shadow Open Market Committee, which was a group of private economists who would critique the Fed on a regular basis, but they were not, they had no functional role. They were not an arm of government. They were independent private economists who would just talk about what the Fed was doing. Some of them had been on the Fed. Having someone look over your shoulder as chairman of the Federal Reserve and possibly be chairman in waiting is a horrible idea. The independence of a central bank, as Justin just said, is really key to a strong monetary policy that promotes, as ours does, maximum sustainable employment and stable prices. And this would cut away at that rather dramatically.
Ethel Kennedy, matriarch of one of America's most famous political families, has died. She was 96 years old. Her family shared the news on X, saying she died from complications related to a stroke she suffered last week. Here's a look at her storied life.
Like so many in her family, Ethel Kennedy's life was nothing short of dramatic, both in its highs and lows. Born in Chicago in 1928 to George and Ann Skakel, she was a child of privilege. Her father's success in the coal industry allowed the family to move to Greenwich, Connecticut, where she and her 6 siblings would be raised. It was at college in New York where she met Robert Kennedy. They married in 1950. 3 years before John F. Kennedy would wed Jackie. Together, the two couples led the country through the Camelot era. It was Ethel who encouraged Bobby to run for president after the assassination of JFK.
There was such excitement and such a feeling that so much had to be done, but it could be done.
In 1968, she was by his side when he was assassinated at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. 6 months later, she gave birth to her 11th child, Rory. She never remarried. In the decades that followed, Ethel endured a number of tragedies. Through all the heartbreak, she continued to carry on the Kennedy legacy of public service. She created the nonprofit organization, the Robert F. Kennedy Memorial Center for Human Rights, and put time and effort into various social causes.
They've cut VISTA, they've cut the Peace Corps. I mean, where is a teenager supposed to look to for direction? I think the valve's been turned off for them, and I think it's a very dangerous situation.
Her life in public service inspired her children.
And they're going to make their own way, and they'll make their own mistakes. And you live through those until it all comes out all right.
Her daughter Kathleen Kennedy Townsend served as Maryland's lieutenant governor. Her son Joseph Kennedy Jr. was elected to Congress. Her grandson Joe Kennedy III also represented Massachusetts in Congress. And this year, her son Robert Kennedy Jr. ran for president.
And really, everybody can do it. There's always something just around the corner that if you see something wrong, if you speak out, you can change it.
In 2014, Ethel was recognized for her work and service to the country when President Obama awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor.
Such a fun idea. As you know, I'm sure, that Jack is the one who started it.
Ethel spent most of the final years of her life at the Kennedy compound in Hyannisport. She was the last member of the original, iconic Kennedy dynasty.
A lot of people have made some sacrifice in their lives to make it a better world. And I think in a lot of ways it is. There's a lot more we can do.
Ethel Kennedy was 96 years old.